now in 2003, and the rest of the things she would say by herself. Ms. Mevish, please come and please introduce. Thank you for it.
Sisters, Salam Alaikum. We are half the Ummah, and we gave birth to the other half. So I submit that makes us a significant half in the Ummah. And I truly believe the answer to unity lies in this room today and across the Muslim world, wherever sisters like you are gathering. You just have to look at the chaos in Syria to see what happens when we become disunited. Brothers are killing brothers. Why? If we pulled them into a room together and said, who is the enemy? They would say, Assad. If we asked them, why are you in Syria? They would say, we need to topple, to get rid of Assad. Why are they fighting each other? While they are fighting each other, they are making the enemy, Assad, even stronger by the day. And the West are looking and mocking. And our secular enemies, people who hate the thought of any religion, never mind Islam, our secular enemies are mocking and laughing. But the real tragedy in all of this are our Syrian sisters, mothers and daughters and wives, struggling to try and survive. There are 22 million people living in Syria. About 3 million now are refugees. Nearly 7 million have been displaced, have had to flee their homes. Not one family in Syria has not tasted the tragedy of this conflict. A conflict that should have been over if our brothers had been united in one cause and not been distracted. I really despair. And it is a problem our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wrestled with in the very early days, where being a Muslim could cost you your life. I was blessed enough to be able to perform Hajj a few years ago, and I went after Hajj to the battleground of Uhud, the first major battle that the Muslims had. And a military historian explained to me why Muslims were defeated. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had told his army, very much like the army today in Syria, an army of ordinary men who weren't professional soldiers, but they had a determination in their heart to fight for what is right. And he told them, hold fast along this area. Don't leave the higher ground. And as the battle commenced, who were they fighting? Khalid bin Walid, who wasn't a Muslim then. And he and his army came in, and one of the first things they did was to distract the Muslim army as the battle went on, and they feigned defeat and they pretended to run. And this diverted the attention of the brothers, who went running after them. And they didn't listen to the Prophet, peace be upon him. They broke ranks and they paid the price. And the Battle of Uhud was a great victory for Khalid bin Walid, one that is still discussed today in military colleges around the world. All because of a lack of discipline, a lack of unity. And we are seeing this time and time again. Alhamdulillah, Khalid bin Walid became a Muslim, and we never had to fight him again. But where are the Khalid bin Walids of today? We so need this sort of strong leadership. Whenever I come to gatherings like this, I never hear talk of division. I never hear talk of a sectarian nature. We are always united in one goal. So why is there so much disunity? You know, we are the mothers. The mother is the first point of education for the next generation. The mother is the madrasa, the person who rocks the cradle, the person who brings up and influences the next generation. Somewhere along the line we have to take responsibility. The stories that I'm hearing coming out of Syria are horrendous. I first went to Syria in the early 80s, and then 20 years later I was there again, and the big pictures of the leader had been replaced by pictures of the son, Bashar al-Assad. Massive, great big pictures staring down on the people menacingly, reminding them who was in charge. I'm happy to say most of those posters and pictures have now been dismantled, and what has gone up in his place is the Shahada, the declaration of faith. The thing that identifies us all as Muslims, our belief in the one God and Muhammad, peace be upon him, being the final messenger. And the Shahada is there in most areas. A sister told me in Aleppo there is a particular street which is targeted by Assad snipers. And this street is called the Shahada Street. And people are advised to say their Shahada when they run across the street, because it is probably the most dangerous street in the world, and some people never get to the other side. So they die with the Shahada on their lips. And this sister, she's a doctor who was helping out in the field hospitals in Syria. And she said that this mother had crossed this street with her two sons, about 6 and 7 years old. And she had them by her hands, and they began to run across this street. And a sniper shot and killed one of her sons outright in his head. And she stopped, and she picked up his lifeless body and turned to her other son, and he was also shot in the head and dropped down dead in front of her. She turned around to where the sniper was, and she ripped open her abaya and said, "Shoot me, because you've already ripped away my life. My children are dead. Kill me." For whatever reason, he didn't. Whether he let her live so she could tell this story, whether he let her live so that she could pass on the brutality of what was happening, I don't know. I don't know what was in his murderous mind. It was found she was insane with grief. And my friend, the doctor, said, how can I even begin to try and mend her? How can I even begin? Where are her wounds? I can't see any blood. But she was driven insane, having seen her 2 boys killed in front of her. That is one little story, one little snapshot of the horrors that are happening to our brothers and sisters every day in Syria. Every day these tales are coming out, eyewitness accounts. Another of my friends, Dr. Salia Arsan, who has roots in Pakistan, she took time off work in London to go to Syria to work in the hospitals there. And the stories that she was telling me were heartbreaking. There are many sisters, alhamdulillah, that are there in field hospitals that are being bombarded. They are doing tremendously brave things. Please make dua for these sisters. You know, the West often says, Muslim women, that we are subjugated and oppressed. Well, there are our sisters out there in areas that Western armies wouldn't dare put a single female soldier, and yet our sisters are out there trying to save lives, paying the full price of this bravery. It is incredible. Obviously, we can't all go out and do courageous things. We can't all be in the front lines in the field hospitals. I don't know that I would even have the guts to go anywhere near that region at the moment. But what we can do is go out to the wider public and tell the truth about what is happening in Syria, about the atrocities that are happening in Syria. We must get this message through. You see, for some in the West, they're quite happy to see our brothers kill each other. Let them get on with it. That is their attitude. As long as they're fighting each other, they're not bothering us. And so some leaders are quite prepared to stand by and let the slaughter continue. The meeting in Geneva recently achieved absolutely nothing. It never was going to achieve anything. It was all posturing and gesturing to make Russia look good, to make the Americans look good. They brought the Assad regime and representatives of the rebels in the one room. The only thing that was achieved was when the Syrian regime said, we will give safe passage to the women and children of Homs. Let them come out. If this is your concern, if people are starving inside Homs, let them come out. We will give them safe passage. And Western politicians tried to make the most of this, saying this is a great gesture, this is some progress. Was it hell? Safe passage would have meant leaving the hell of Homs, to go into not even a refugee camp, a concentration camp of Nazi standards for those women and children. And what do you think would have happened to the men and the boys left behind in Homs? You've all heard of Srebrenica, I'm sure. Assad would have sent his bombs and he would have blown them to smithereens. Another war crime to add to the catalogue of atrocities that are being carried out today. And there are Muslim countries who are fighting their own wars by proxy in this land as well. We have the Saudis playing one of the dirtiest games with their money. We have Iran, master tacticians, who are also meddling on the ground. There are other dark forces. If I said this to a Western audience, I would be called crazy. She's a delusionist, she's a conspiracy theorist. But I know in Pakistan, you fully understand the destructiveness of other countries meddling in your affairs. And this is what is happening in Syria. But don't be distracted by the confusion. Focus on the real story of the moment, and that is the plight of our brothers and sisters in Syria who need your help, in the refugee camps, in and outside of Syria. But I also want you to make dua for your brothers and sisters who are trapped in enclaves, such as Homs, a city under siege. And I'll tell you how bad it is in Homs. Last year, scholars, eminent scholars, got together and they were told about the people, the families trapped there, who were skeletons draped in skin, who were literally starving to death. Assad had cut off the water, the power, the electricity, everything had gone. No food was getting in, nothing was getting out. And these scholars agonized. And in the end, they released a fatwa saying for the people in that city, it was permissible to eat cats, dogs, donkeys, and any other animals killed by bombs. What is haram for us is now halal for the starving brothers and sisters in Homs. Imagine you have to sit there and watch your child eat the rotting flesh of a cat. Imagine. But it's either that or death. That is the situation, the reality on the ground. So don't let people distract you by saying, oh, don't give money to Syria, it's going to Al-Qaeda, oh, you're helping the anti-Assad forces, they're in hands and they're linked with Israel, and all this nonsense is being fed to prolong the misery of the real victims in all of this, the ones who have been forgotten about, while all the world leaders posture and gesture on the stage in Geneva. Don't be distracted by those arguments. If the CIA is on the ground in Syria, so what? That doesn't stop us from digging deep to help our brothers and sisters who need, if anybody needed food on the table, bread on the table now, more than anywhere else in the world. It is in a place like Homs, it's in the refugee camps in Syria. in countries Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey. I was able to come out to Karachi thanks to the Muslim Ummah Solidarity Forum. It's a forum that was created on January the 1st of this year, set up in Karachi, designed to promote unity in the Ummah, and the brothers who've set up this organisation know that the first crisis point is Syria. And when I told people I was coming out to Pakistan to raise awareness, to raise funds, to help in any way we could for the people of Syria, I was told, why are you going to Pakistan? They have enough problems of their own. And it's true. You know, I've been coming to Pakistan, a country I regard as my second home. I've been coming here since 2001. I've seen the highs and I've seen the lows. I think there have been many lows. Man-made disasters, natural disasters. Who can forget the misery of the earthquake? And then more misery brought by the floods. And you know, I remember when I was in Kashmir during the period of the earthquake, and I was watching this food operation being set up, and there were queues of people waiting for bread. And I was speaking to this woman, and she was in her abaya, and I asked her about her life and who she was, and she pulled her abaya back, and she had gold going all the way up to her arms. She said, I went to bed the night before the earthquake a wealthy woman. That rubble over there is my home. The mounds of rubble behind it are the 2 streets that I owned. These people who are queuing with me used to pay me rent. Now I have nothing apart from what I have on my arms. And look at me, I'm now queuing with my tenants for bread. We never know what Allah has in store for us. We have no idea where we will be tomorrow, next week, next year. So please, think about what I've said today. Think about what practical help you can give to the people of Syria, whether it's setting up a website, a blog, sending out emails, writing out a check, alhamdulillah, if you've got the money to do that, organising fundraising groups among yourselves. There is a booklet which I think will be distributed later on, which also tells you a little bit more about the Syrian crisis and how it all started, which is worth reading, how the actions of a group of young Syrian boys actually triggered the revolution. And then in the back there are details of the Muslim Ummah Solidarity Forum. Contact them, offer them your services as a volunteer, as a benefactor, as a supporter, anything that you can do. Because I'll tell you something, we do have a great Ummah, a generous Ummah that is united and does come together in times of crisis. And I bet there are brothers and sisters sitting in refugee camps now, in Turkey, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, who dug deep when Pakistan was beset with earthquakes and floods. And I bet that they helped you. Now it's our turn to try in any way we can to help them. And probably most important of all, please make dua for our brothers and sisters there. The power of prayer is priceless, and that is a gift that you can give 5 times a day, every day, to our brothers and sisters. Thank you very much. Salam alaikum.
The first question is from Miss Nilofer, Miss or Mrs. I do not know. May you?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. She is asking, our enemy is trying to eradicate the possibility of emerging a powerful leadership, especially in Syria, because they are aware that the Khalifa or leader from Syria, as the Hadith says. Do you agree with it that they do not want to emerge, to let a powerful leadership emerge in Syria?
There are many different reasons why the West did not want a regime change in Syria. They were very happy with Assad. America was sending people to be tortured by Assad during the start of the war on terror. So make no mistake, Assad, like Saddam, remember him, was a friend of America. This revolution has now made it impossible for the Americans to support Assad. And so you can see, America's prime concern in that region is Israel. That's its prime concern. Don't believe that any tears are being shed over the deaths of Muslims. They're not interested. It's the protection of Israel. So what America is concerned about is who is going to come after Assad, and will they be friends of Israel? Because Assad certainly wasn't an enemy of Israel. He's happy to use his guns and his tanks and his helicopter gunships on his own people, but he hasn't used them on Israel, which is occupying, by the way, a large part of Syria. So there's the Americans in there. Then you have the Saudis. Now, why would the Saudis fear revolution in Syria? Because the Saudis do not want democracy in Syria, nor would they want the emergence of a caliphate. Because what impact would that then have on them? So the Saudis are using their money to fund some of the so-called rebels who are committing atrocities against Muslims in on the ground. Then you have Iran. Iran has been around for centuries. They are masters in the art of tactics. And they do not want to see the fall of the Alawi regime in Syria, because it interferes with their foreign relations in the so-called, I hesitate to call them the Shia arm, because I don't want sectarianism coming in here. But the Iranians are playing a very clever game. If the Americans are going to be in, so are the Russians. And the Russians are friends of the Syrian regime. Why? Because they make a fortune supplying weapons to the Syrian army. It's a vast army. So you have all these major players inside who do not want to see a democracy, and even more do they not want to see a caliphate. And it's all about the protection, for some anyway, not all, but it's about the protection of Israel. Israel are the masters of intelligence and dirty tricks. And they are also on the ground, funding some of these so-called rebel groups. So you can see the whole complicated political picture. And when I said Israel was occupying Syria, I'm sure you've heard of the Golan Heights. The name is actually Golan. Golan Heights gives the impression that they're just hanging onto this little cliff edge of Syria. Golan is a huge region, rich in agriculture, and within the occupied region is a reservoir which supplies 15% of Israel's water. There are also 3 villages which are lived in by Syrian people. It's a huge area. Now you would think that Assad would have been more concerned over the years about getting that land back. But he hasn't lifted one finger. And yet you can see from that shocking documentary what he was prepared to do to his own people. As mothers, and I know that you're a home educator as well of your children, as mothers, the easiest thing I would say to do is to inspire our young ones with tales of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, of great characters, of wisdom like Saladin Ayyubi and Khalid bin Walid and some of the great scholars in Islam. You know, I remember as a child at school, I never had any contact with Muslims. In my village, you were either a Protestant or a Catholic, and there was nothing as exotic as Islam. And we were taught in history about the Crusades and the battle for Jerusalem and how great the Christians were. And we never were taught about Islam or Muslims. But I do remember they talked about the enemy and this great adversary on the other side called Saladin. And they talked of his wisdom. And they talked of how the King of England was in awe of this great warrior. They didn't call him a Muslim, I can't remember what name was given to him. But I always remember as a child this great man of wisdom, and even though he was the enemy, there was huge respect for him. So this is very important to get through to our children. We have amazing role models right in the early days of Islam. We don't need to look at the tabloid newspapers or the showbiz columns to find role models for our children. We just have to look at the history of Islam and talk to them about these great people and talk to them about the events in their lives. As I said at the beginning, I was taken to the battlefield of Uhud, and it was like a living history lesson being told where we went wrong in that early battle. These are the messages that we need to get through to our children about the great men and women and the great leaders. And I would say, you know, they can take those lessons from the early days of Islam and adapt them to present day life. I mean, could you imagine if there were great leaders now on the ground in Syria? You wouldn't have Muslim brothers killing Muslim brothers. Assad would have gone and your caliphate would have been well underway by now. But unfortunately, that isn't the situation, and the only way we can improve things now is through education.
Thank you.
The roadless mothers. Yes, I said before, the mother is the madrasa. The mother is the madrasa. You are the first educator for your children. It's a huge, huge responsibility. Yes, I think that we should tell them what's going on in the world, but what I love about this documentary is that it conveys a message, it brings emotions to you without showing blood and guts frame after frame after frame. Because if you, and you know, alhamdulillah, there are some documentaries and all you see is blood, blood, blood. And it desensitizes people and young children, and they get used to the notion. I'm still trying to find out what the little girl said at the end of that documentary, because she spoke in Arabic and the translation was in Urdu.
Allah is for Allah, Allah is with us.
Right, but twice I've seen and listened to her now, and twice she has moved me to tears, and I'm hoping to find out the whole speech.
Muslims and Arabs
Yes.
come to the rescue.
Yes.
But then she said that Allah is with us. All right.
At the end, she said that Allah is with us.
And that little girl's speech is probably worth 10 images of the dead bodies that are in hospitals. So, you know, we have to think of ways of getting a powerful message through, but not be too shocking and graphic in detail.
Trying to tell my daughter about
I think it's getting very long, please, because we have to keep the time. You better talk to her. Better talk to her at tea time. That would be a better talk with her.
One question is left about media she has to answer.
Okay.
The influence media can play. Should this for true
I
stories?
just request all the audience to see her at the tea time. That would be the speech.
Last answer.
Oh, well, just with regards media, you can drive the media's agenda if you write to the editor in enough numbers by email, and you know, bombard editors saying we want more features on Syria, we want to know what is happening on the ground. If you see anything that is obviously false or misleading, then write into the letters page and say this is false and misleading, and just keep your letter short, about 2 or 3 paragraphs, and if enough letters go in, the editor will take notice. And so, you know, never underestimate your own ability as a letter writer, as sending emails, raising public awareness. You could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Your letter could be the 100th one that finally snaps and makes a difference. So never underestimate your ability as an individual, and collectively you can do incredible things. Thank you.